Hi guys, it's Aoife from Words of Clover and I'm here with my October wrap up. So I didn't get as much books read in October as I feel like I have done in the past few months. It was just one of those kind of slower reading months for me. November has kind of been the same as well. But yeah, sometimes you just have slower reading months than normal, and I still read a lot of really great books, so I am going to talk about them now. So the first book that I read in October was a book I've heard quite a lot about and I was quite eager to read, and it also checked off a challenge on like the 2023 Pop Sugar reading challenge, which I try and do every year, which I enjoy, and that was Bunny by Mona Awad. This is kind of a horror college campus novel where you're following a young woman who is going to this kind of prestigious college. She's doing, I think it's kind of like a master's course in creative writing, and she is very much unlike a lot of the other students that go to her college, where a lot of them are very privileged, come from money, where she is someone who's had to struggle and really had to, work really hard to get where she is. And there's this clique of girls who call each other bunnies, and they're kind of like this little group of friends who are on the like in her class that she shares the classes with, and she has this kind of really big dislike for these girls, but also like a real big obsession with them. She's kind of just like fascinated, and she kind of like loves to hate them. And then one day they end up inviting her to come along to one of their, they call them a slut salon, where it was kind of just like them hanging out, and we see how she is kind of like indoctrinated into being a bunny, and it's kind of this really strange brainwashing experience that she kind of goes through, where she kind of ends up becoming this bunny. And there is this type of like horror magical element in this book that is like very odd, really weird. This book was just very, it was creepy, it was weird, it was kind of, it was engrossing in that way. I listened to it on audiobook, and I don't know if I had read it physically if I would have liked it a little bit more. I did like enjoy this book, I just didn't love it, and it just didn't hit me the way I've seen it hit a lot of other people. Some people read this and it's like a 5-star book, they absolutely love it, where for me this kind of stayed at like a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I think, yeah, it just didn't like wow me in many ways. There were some like reveals near the end where I was like, okay, like this is kind of mad, but in the same way that a lot of like horror books of this genre kind of tend to be, a lot of it is very like unexplained, a little bit like unrealistic obviously. And yeah, there were some ways that I was just like, okay, but like how is this all happening, like how is this something that is happening? And yeah, we don't really get answers to those questions, which I sometimes kind of like as well. But yeah, there was just something about this book where I thought it was going to be like possibly a 5-star read, and it just wasn't, so I was a little bit disappointed. But in saying that, I definitely am not ruling out Mona Awad. I'm definitely going to read more of her books, and I really like kind of the weird direction she went in this, and I'm looking forward to reading more of her books. The next book unfortunately was another disappointment for me, and that was The Graces by Siobhan McGowan. And this is a historical fiction book that is set around the early 1900s, like 19 around 1912 maybe. We're following the story of, well, first of all we meet these two priests who are talking, and they're talking about this young woman who was after who had died a few years earlier, and they're talking about this young woman and how she seems to have this big kind of like a reputation, and almost like people who are worshipping her after her death, they're kind of lauding her as almost like a saint. And they're talking about this woman, and they end up like going back to talk about this priest is saying how he talked to this woman on her deathbed a few years ago, and she confessed her kind of like life story to him, and he starts telling this other priest about her life story. And we go back to when this young woman was born in this kind of in County Clare in Ireland, and how she grew up, and she was always kind of blessed with something kind of like similar to the sight, and she always knew when someone was kind of like hurting in some way or maybe needed some medical attention. And people kind of looked at her a little bit funny because of this, and eventually she was told that she had to move to Dublin to stay with her aunt and uncle there, because things in like her local area, they just were looking at her a little bit funny, kind of like, pointing and calling her a witch and stuff like that. So she moves to Dublin in the 1900s, and obviously there's a lot of like different things going on. It's kind of like leading up to tensions in Ireland because of Home Rule, and we're leading up to the 1916 Easter Rising, and she kind of gets in with a crowd who are experimenting in this type of like weird kind of healing, where it's kind of like a mesmerist, like a mesmerizing type of healing. And they bring her on board, and because of her natural gifts, she ends up becoming almost like a leader in this, and she's kind of told that she will be able to heal everyone just by basically almost like her mind rather than anything else. And yeah, the story kind of goes from there. We see how some terrible things happen, and eventually she realizes that she is not this, you know, like amazing healer that like she's been told that she is, and these terrible things happen, and there's these secrets and cover-ups, and we basically see that play out throughout the novel. um I don't really know what I was expecting with this. I think I was expecting it to be a little like slightly maybe creepy or gothic in some way, and it wasn't really. And then I also found the story itself quite dull and actually quite boring to follow. And yeah, I was just expecting like a big moment, and there just wasn't. It was just very flatlined for the entire thing. And yeah, I just found myself bored reading this, and I didn't really care about this woman's story. Yeah, it just wasn't what I thought it was going to be. So I just felt myself a little bit disappointed in it. And then I was disappointed again by another book that I read that I also really didn't like, and that was How to Build a Boat by Elaine Feeney. I listened to this on audiobook, and this was longlisted and possibly shortlisted for the Booker Prize. I can't remember now if it's been shortlisted as well. But in this one, we are following a young boy called Jamie, who it's never really described what exactly, like how exactly his mind works. But from my reading of the book, it's quite clear that he is somewhere on the neurodiverse spectrum. Like I would say that he's autistic, but obviously it's never actually written down anywhere in the book if he is autistic. We are following his point of view, and then we are also getting the point of view of one of his teachers, and we are seeing Jamie as he goes to a new school, like a secondary school, and how he is kind of dealing in this like all boys secondary school where he's been bullied a little bit, and then he kind of ends up being taken under the wing of this teacher who is going through a lot of different things in her personal life, including infertility. She ends up befriending Jamie, and then also befriending a new teacher in school who also kind of takes an interest in Jamie and helping him on this project that he wants to do, which is to build a perpetual motion machine to basically go and try and find his mother. But his mother died when he was born, but he has this idea that if he builds this boat, he's going to be able to, it's basically a boat, if he builds this perpetual motion machine, he'll be able to travel far enough that he'll eventually meet his mother. And we're just seeing this story, and like, again, there's nothing particularly wrong with this book. I just felt like I wasn't really sure what the author was trying to do with it. There was parts of it that were kind of sweet, and the way people looked after Jamie. There was also parts where people were like treated him very badly, but the way people banded around together to help him and to encourage him and to be there like friends with him was also really, really lovely to see. But at the same time, I felt like, is it a little bit saccharine in parts? I don't know. But again, I just thought parts of it were just a little bit saccharine. There were other parts that were like not necessarily vulgar or parts, but like there were just parts that I was like, I don't really see why this is in it. There was so much with the teacher character and her relationship with her husband, and like kind of how it kind of all falls apart, and a lot of it was like very much, I felt like, not really the husband's fault. It was kind of like she was going through something, and she kind of, yeah, didn't treat people in her life very well, I don't think. And yeah, I just didn't really like this book, and I just didn't get anything from it, and I just thought it was a little bit messy, and I just wasn't sure what the author was trying to do with it at all. And this is the second book I've read by Elaine Feeney, and it's the second book by hers that both books I really didn't enjoy, and both of them I think have been a 2-star now. So maybe it's just a me thing that I just don't get on with her writing. So yeah, I'm just a little bit confused about how this one was longlisted for the Booker, because it really doesn't feel like a Booker book to me. After that, I read a book that I got from the library, which is one that is kind of has been on my TBR for a while. It's got like a series that I'm just reading through, and that is The Ugly Duchess by Eloisa James. This is part of her like fairy tale series. None of the books are linked, but they're all like retellings of different fairy tales. So this is obviously the Ugly Duckling, as you can tell from the title, The Ugly Duchess. We're following a character called Theo and a character called James, and they are childhood friends. They kind of grew up together in the same house, because Theo's father would have been James's father's like very good friend, and when he died, they kind of took her and her mother in. So they've grown up, but they're best friends, and they're both very young. Like Theo's only like 18 maybe, so she's just kind of starting her season, and then James is only like 21, 22, so very, very young. Not really, like at the time, like is very young for a man to get married in like Regency era. And he's basically told by his father, who isn't necessarily a very nice man, that the two of them are in a lot of debt, and the father has made some very bad financial decisions, and he's also ended up messing with Theo's money that her and her mother don't know about. He's basically messed with her, what would be her dowry, and and to fix that, James basically has to marry Theo. And Theo's kind of known she's not particularly like a very good looking girl, or she hasn't really grown into her beauty yet, is a better way to say it. So she isn't being very like sought after by people, and then James basically has to convince her that he has fallen in love with her too, so they can get married, which they do. And then basically a couple of days after the marriage, Theo finds out the truth and sends James away, and then she doesn't see him for like 7 or 8 years. During that time he basically becomes a pirate, and then the story is the two of them being separated, him eventually coming back into the house, and him trying to kind of like win her back again, and trying to convince her that he does love her, and he always did love her. And so yeah, this was okay. It definitely wasn't my favorite of the series. I liked the way it played on this, like the theme of like the ugly duckling and Theo kind of growing up to be a swan, and how she played with that as well, and how she kind of enjoyed her independence away from James. When she kind of sent him away, she was kind of this, she was a duchess, and she didn't have her husband with her. She had everything was kind of in her control, and I really liked seeing how she did that. There was definitely chemistry between the characters that I really liked. There was a little bit of a, when James came back, I felt like his personality was so different in many ways to the boy who had gone, like the 21-22-year-old who'd left. And I was like, it has been 7 or 8 years, like he obviously has been through a lot, like he's seen a lot of the world in that time, but there was just a certain like side to his personality, whereas like I just feel like it's not realistic that he would change that much, especially with someone who he grew up with and he knew so well. I don't think his personality would be that different, especially like behind closed doors, and his like persona and stuff. So yeah, that was kind of, I didn't really know how to feel about that. So this is like a 3 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed it. I'll continue on. I can't remember I think there's maybe 1 or 2 books left in the series that I'll read on. But yeah, it's not my favorite of the series so far, but I still enjoyed it. I still always enjoy a read through romance as something just kind of fun and light, and kind of a nice filler in between other books. Then I read a book that was my first 5 star of the month, and one I absolutely loved and will probably be on my favourite books of the year, I say. And that is Calla by Colin Walsh. I basically haven't seen anyone talk badly about this book. Everyone I've seen has given it either a very strong 4 or 5 stars. And this is a book that is set in Ireland, in the small town in Ireland. And we are following a few characters. Some of them have lived in this town all their life, and then others left the town when they were obviously in college age, and left the town, have done their thing, and are now a few years later, I'm not really sure what age they are. I think maybe in like their late 20s, their 30s potentially, and they've come back to this town now. One of the characters is kind of like an ex-musician. He kind of made it big, and now he's back in his hometown to try and do kind of some business ventures and stuff like that. One of the guys has never left. He's been like works like he still works in the same cafe that his mum runs, and he's kind of basically never left the apartment that he grew up in. And then one girl left, became a journalist, has been living in Canada, and this is the first time she's been back in a very long time, and she's kind of haunted by some things that happened when they were teenagers. And we find out that when they were teenagers, they were all in this really close friend group, and one of the girls who was like central to the friend group, her name was Calla, she went missing, and they never found what happened to her, that she'd never heard of again. And now when they're back in the town all together, they're kind of back for different reasons, and a body ends up being found, and it soon becomes clear that this body is the body of Calla. So someone did actually hurt her or murder her, and now they're kind of all remembering the last few months and the few days that they all saw her, different things that were happening in the town, and it becomes clear that there was a lot of secrets and corruption in the town, that they kind of found out about when they were teenagers, but never really truly understood until years later now, when they're finding things out again, or kind of maybe re-examining things from a different viewpoint. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I thought like there were parts of it that like the flashbacks to like these teenage friendships. I really love the first romantic relationships as well. We see some flashes of different sides of the characters from the time they were young as well as the time when they were older, and kind of like bad sides of them and good sides of them. There was a character called Mush in this who is just the loveliest character, and I felt like he's one of like the teenage boys that we end up following when he's older as well. And we see when he was a teenage boy how he kind of became really good friends with the girls in like a non-romantic sense, and he enjoyed just spending time with the girls because they were that little bit softer and freer in many ways than the boys, and he could like enjoy like join them on their sleepovers, and they would mess with his hair and do his makeup and stuff. And even though like he just enjoyed like spending time with them because it was just like a lighter side. They didn't have to be like drinking or smoking or doing I guess things that teenage boys do. It was just something a little bit softer, and I just loved that. I just thought it was such a gorgeous image, and there's like so many different parts of this book that are like that I just really really loved. I thought it painted a picture of this small town with so many secrets. I don't think this is necessarily like a thriller or a crime book in many ways. Like, yes, we're following the disappearance of this girl. Like, it is very central to the story of the book, this question mark over what happened to her. But I don't think the book is necessarily about what happened to her. It's more about the characters as a whole, and like what they went to together and their friendship and what they're going to do next, and how they are going to finally maybe stand up to things that they were afraid of doing when they were younger. More about kind of like corruption and things happening in the town, like underneath it all, and secrets in the town. I really enjoyed this. I will say there is a content warning for this around like animal abuse at a certain point in it. I kind of like skim read parts of that. Like it's just around kind of like dogs and dog fighting, which obviously I'm not a fan of. So yeah, there is a little bit of that. So just a content warning for that. I read another 5-star book. This is an audiobook that I read, and that is Carrie, Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And guys, I mean, I've always like appreciated tennis. I've never really like been super into it, but I think I'm gonna like have to be really into it now because I enjoyed this so much, and I think it's just like made me a tennis fan. I think like next year I will be like tuning into Wimbledon and the US Open because I just enjoyed reading this so much. This is obviously a book about Carrie Soto, who is a like she's a retired tennis player. She was like #1 in the world, and now her record is about to be overthrown by this new like kind of this up and comer who's really good, who's kind of like the next Carrie Soto, if you know what I mean. And she's about to overthrow Carrie Soto's records for the amount of wins that she has, and Carrie Soto is kind of like, she doesn't want that, she wants to keep her record. So she ends up going back into training and going back to Wimbledon and the US Open and all of that for the last time of her career to try and take back her record. And we are seeing how she is like dealing with all of that. We learn about her career from the time she was young and how she got into tennis, and then how she became a superstar, and how she kind of lost and gained relationships along the way, and then how the struggle to get back into fitness and get back into tip-top shape again, against competitors who are younger and fitter than her and don't have like injuries that can reoccur, and aching bones, and just like a body that isn't as seasoned as hers. And we're seeing all of that. And the audiobook for this is so good because there's just like all these like kind of sound effects and stuff, for like you have like the parts in before the matches where you have like the sports commentators talking to each other, and you have the noises around that, and as if it's like actually on television. And I just enjoyed it so much, and like the intensity of listening to the matches in Carrie Soto's point of view, and like a play-by-play of what is happening. It was so exciting. I just really enjoyed it. I was so into this book, and yeah, I just enjoyed it from start to finish. This is definitely my top 3 now of Taylor Jenkins Reid's. I think like my least favorite that I've read is Malibu Rising, where my top is Daisy Jones, this, and Evelyn Hugo. It's kind of like I have to really decide. I think I'd have to reread Evelyn Hugo again because I've only read that one once to see how it stands up now against these two. But I think this is just like classic Taylor Jenkins Reid. It's so good. And yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I absolutely loved the really strong father-daughter relationship that is in this book. I really loved it, so I really recommend. So 5 out of 5 stars. Next couple of books I did talk a little bit about in my vlog that I shared in October, so I won't talk about them too much here. And the first one I talked about in that vlog, I finished it at the start of the vlog, was the Ex Hex by Erin Sterling. This is just a cute, spooky romance between a witch and a warlock, I guess. And they were dated when they were very young, like teenagers, and he broke her heart, so she ended up accidentally hexing him. And when he comes back into town 9 years later, the hex comes back in full force to, kind of for him, but then it also backfires on the town. So the two of them have to work together to try and find out how to remove the hex. And obviously the two of them grow closer again during that time. And it is just very cute and romancy, romantic. And it kind of gave me like practical magic vibes. And Halloween Town and stuff like that. It was very, very fun. And I think people say like, no, if you like, just like if you like all the October vibes that you want, like autumnal, October, spooky, but not scary, this is like absolutely perfect. So this was just a very cute 4 out of 5 stars for me. The next book I also really enjoyed, that was House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson. This is the second book I've read by Alexis Henderson, the first one being The Year of the Witching. And she writes just really good atmospheric horror books that are creepy and gory in parts and just like gives you all those like vibes that you want if you want something kind of like opposite to the Ex Hex, but again, not super duper gory. I think this is really good. Like there's a little bit of gore, there's a little bit of horror, but it's just very very atmospheric. In this one we are following a character called Marion who lives in this very poor part of town in this like it's kind of like this is kind of like speculative fiction in this town that she is living in. She's very poor, she never doesn't have a lot of prospects, so she ends up signing on to be something called a blood maid, which is something that, you know, apparently is like this very like coveted like role that you basically are like treated really well, you're fed, you're pampered, but the whole thing is that you are donating your blood or you're letting these people feed on you. And it's never really like said that these people are vampires. It seems like they're just normal people, but this is a world that kind of the currency is almost blood. Like blood powers everything, including the very rich families, like very rich old families, that the blood can kind of like heal these people if they're sick or if they are tired. The blood of these young girls kind of will, I guess, like satisfy them and like make them stronger and better and stuff like that. So that is what Marion is doing. So she ends up going to this House of Hunger and becoming the blood maid for this the mistress of this house. And the two of them also form a romantic relationship, but you soon see that there are probably like secrets and like things just don't feel completely right in this house. And Marion starts like looking into that, and she soon discovers some like really horrifying things that have been hid from her and from the rest of the world, basically, about what actually like blood maids do and what they're there for. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one, 4 out of 5 stars again, really hooked into it. I just love how Alexis Henderson writes her horror. I think she, again, just really atmospheric, really rich in detail. Her descriptions are just so good. And I was just, yeah, I kind of like how she wraps them up in like one book as well. And yeah, you're kind of left really satisfied by the end, I think. Then I read my second Stephen King book, so I've decided that I want to try and read at least one Stephen King book every year, maybe around Halloween. And this year I got Joyland by Stephen King because it was one of the only ones actually that my library had on like the mobile app. So I actually love the cover of this book. I think it's just like so good. But this book was kind of like this was like a good book in many ways, but it wasn't like a horror book. And even in terms of like the mystery element of it, it's very light. This is definitely more of like a coming of age novel. We are following a young man who is heartbroken at the very start of the book, and he ends up getting this summer job in this kind of like amusement park called Joyland. And we kind of learn very quickly that this role or this job was kind of like the making of him. It's kind of like a really pivotal point of his like young adulthood and like becoming a man in many ways. This job is where he found like some of his best friends. He kind of like found like another love, and also went through these like really terrifying moments. So we kind of see how like he comes across this job and how he gets on with the job, and he ends up befriending this young mother and her son who live in this town. And the son is very sick. He seems to have like a chronic illness, and it's very clear that he probably won't live very long. And he ends up befriending the two of them, and he wants to bring them to Joyland for a day to, you know, to make the kid happy. And also he has a little bit of a crush on the mother as well, so we kind of see how this relationship is also very important to him. And underneath all of this, we know there's this kind of a mystery urban legend around one of the rides in Joyland, which is, they say that it is haunted by a woman who was killed several years earlier on this ride, and her ghost now haunts this ride. And the man that we're following, the character we're following, has never seen this ghost, but he knows other people who have seen her and have been really creeped out by her, and he is kind of like really interested in what happened to this girl and who her murderer is, and he kind of like him and another friend kind of like start sleuthing a little bit about who could be the murderer, and like, you know, is there any way that they could catch him. So they kind of start looking into this, and basically everything kind of comes full circle in the end. Everything kind of ends up connecting together, and we see how it all ends up. This was fun. I enjoyed it. I really like Stephen King's writing. I think he writes characters and places. I think Joyland as a place, as a location was described so well. It came alive really, really well for me. And the main character we're following, his name is Devin Jones. I feel like him as well. I feel like we really, really get to know him really, really well, and I felt very close to him as a reader, as he was telling his tale. I really enjoyed just learning about his time in Joyland. So yeah, this was like a 3.5 stars for me as well. I just felt like, in terms of, we learn about the ghost quite early on, and then it doesn't really come back until almost like the very end. I felt like I would just liked a little bit more ghost, and a little bit more horror, more of everything that you would kind of expect in a Stephen King. So yeah, this was, as I said, a little bit more of a coming of age novel than a mystery or a horror novel. But that doesn't mean that it's not very good. It's just wasn't quite what I had wanted going into it. Finally finished the Diviners series with The King of Crows by Libba Bray. So this is the fourth and final book of the Diviners, which I read way back. I originally read the first Diviners like way back when it first came out, and then I started rereading them about 3 years ago now, and I have finally gotten around to finishing them up. So that is what this book was. I listened to it on audiobook. The audiobooks for this whole series are really, really good. They're all narrated by January Lavoie. I talked about this series more like in my vlog. I enjoyed this. I gave it a 4 to 5 stars. I felt the pacing of this one dragged a little bit for me in the middle, and I kind of was like really ready for it to finish by the time it did wrap up. I was happy to see some of the characters again, and I was really kind of like really interested to see how everything would wrap up, and I think pretty much like it did wrap up pretty nicely, and I was kind of happy where all the characters did end up by the end of the book. So yeah, it's just a pity that I feel like the pacing really, really dragged for a good portion of the middle of the book. So yeah, that was just a shame. So, but again, 4 to 5 stars, 3.5 to 4 to 5 stars. I still enjoyed it, and I'm glad to have finished the series. The last book I want to talk about is an audiobook that I listened to, and I kind of listened to this to tick off my my non-fiction book of the month, because I like to try and read at least one every month, and I was definitely behind in October for that, so I had to try and find a short one to listen to. That is The Stars in Our Eyes by Julie Clam. This is just a book that is basically Julie talking about celebrity and like people's obsession with celebrities, and parasocial relationships with celebrities, and what celebrity means to different people. And it kind of, each chapter is intercepted by people talking about like celebrity encounters that they've had, and this was just like an enjoyable listen. I don't think like Julie had anything profound to say about celebrity. There was a couple of things that she said about celebrities that I quite enjoyed, like things around there were some things around cancel culture that I liked seeing her explore, and there she was also saying a thing about how like a celebrity to one person might just be a normal person for someone else. So, you know, someone who might really like chess might see a chess champion in the street and get like so overwhelmed by their that celebrity status for that person, where another person could see this chess champion and have no idea who they were. Like, not everyone is a Beyonce or a Taylor Swift. Like, people can be like these like really small celebrities in people's lives, and it kind of made me think about like obviously booktube and the book world and authors and stuff, and how you can get so overwhelmed meeting authors where other people might see these authors and like not think anything about them. So yeah, that was kind of fun to imagine. There was also an interesting discussion about kind of like the rise of like reality TV and that type of celebrity as well, and how celebrities, those types of celebrities as well, feel so much closer to a normal person as well. We kind of, you know, see the ins and outs of these people's lives. There's not like so much mystery surrounding them the way there is around people maybe like Jennifer Aniston and stuff. So I enjoyed that, and then I did enjoy a lot of the celebrity encounters as well, though there was a large portion of them where I didn't really know who the person was, and obviously it's very kind of American centric, this book, so there was a lot of like kind of maybe celebrities that I just didn't really know, might be too young for some of them, I'm not sure, or like they could have been just people that like I have had no idea who they were. And then before I forget, there's actually one more book I wanted to talk about, and that was my classic of the month, and a book I kind of finished this like the start of November, but I read it basically all through October, and that was The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. And this is a book that really surprised me because I really was not expecting to love this as much as I ended up enjoying it. And this is a kind of gothic horror book, and we are following a couple of characters. The mainly is a young artist called Walter, and we see him as he gets a job in this estate, and he is be kind of like an art tutor to these two young women, particularly one young woman, and he ends up falling in love with her. And we kind of see it's kind of like obviously doomed because he is not on her like status, and they are kind of heartbroken the fact that they can't be together, and he ends up eventually having to leave. And throughout this book we see this mysterious person appear, and this woman in white, and we're kind of not sure her connection to everyone, where eventually kind of it starts becoming clear who exactly she is and what connection she has with all of the other people in the book. And we end up following the two sisters in this book. One of them is called Marion and the other is called Laura, and the two of them, we find out, and then we see how Laura ends up in this marriage, which is not a very nice marriage, and is quite, actually seems to pose quite a danger to her. And Marion is trying to basically save her from it, or trying to figure it out. And there's just a lot of like characters in this book that are just like so mysterious and interesting and fun to read about, that I just really, really enjoyed. And I thought the writing in it was so engaging and entertaining and mysterious in many ways. And yeah, I was just really into this book, and I wasn't expecting to love it so much. So I definitely can see why people like Wilkie Collins so much. This was definitely a very fun book for me to read, and yeah, I'm a Wilkie Collins fan now. So this was a very strong 4 to 5 stars for me, and I really, really enjoyed it. So that's everything I have read in October. Please let me know what you guys read in October, if you've read any of the books I've talked about, and I will see you guys again next time. Bye!